I'll be honest with you. The moment I saw the itinerary, a cold dread snaked its way into my heart. It was a glossy, colorful brochure for an all-inclusive trip to a luxury resort in Turks and Caicos, a place my late husband Frank and I had always dreamed of visiting. We had a jar on the mantel, a heavy glass thing filled with quarters and crumpled bills, a testament to a shared dream we never got to live out. But the brochure they left on the kitchen counter, next to a bowl of half-eaten cereal, had one glaring, undeniable omission. My name. Just my son, Mark, his wife, Lisa, and my two grandkids, who I adore more than life itself. They'd been planning this for months, right under my nose, a secret little conspiracy whispered over Sunday dinners and family gatherings where I was always just there. I, Helen Evans, a woman who had spent 65 years building a life, nurturing a family, and holding a home together, was being treated like a piece of old furniture they'd decided to leave behind. I'd been so wrapped up in my own little world of community service, you see. For a woman my age, after a husband's passing, you have to find a way to stay relevant, to feel useful. I was a volunteer at the community center, managing their annual fundraiser. It was a big job, but it gave me purpose. I was also baking cookies for the kids, a new batch every week, a ritual that kept me connected to their little lives in sticky fingers. My other life's work was trying to keep the house Frank built in some semblance of order. Every nail, every plank, every rose bush in the garden held a memory. That house was more than just wood and plaster. It was a museum of our love and a testament to our shared dreams. Now it felt more like a stage for a drama I wasn't even invited to be in. A few weeks before the trip, I started to feel off. A dull ache in my chest that I initially chalked up to stress and my old heart acting up. After all, Frank always said I was tougher than a $10 steak. But this was different. I found myself out of breath just walking up the stairs, and a persistent, throbbing pain became my constant companion. I'm not one to complain, never have been, but a woman knows her own body. So I finally gave in and called my doctor, who, with a voice full of professional concern, told me I needed to come in immediately. The irony of it all was almost poetic. My body was failing me just as my family was. On the day of the family dinner, the air was thick with a strange tension I couldn't quite place. Mark and Lisa were buzzing with excitement, talking about the trip in hushed, conspiratorial tones, their voices dropping whenever I came near. My grandson, Leo, a sweet boy of 7, kept asking me to play checkers, but his mother, Lisa, would shush him, whispering about grown-up plans and not bothering Grandma. I felt it then, the sharp, cold sting of being excluded. It was during the appetizer, a spinach artichoke dip I'd lovingly made from a recipe Frank adored, that the bombshell dropped. Mark, my own flesh and blood, began with a line so rehearsed and condescending it made my stomach turn. "Mom," he started, his face a sickening mix of false sympathy and pure greed, "we're going to Turks and Caicos next week. The doctor said you need a lot of rest, and we're so concerned about your health, so it's probably for the best that you stay here." It was a lie so transparent it made me want to laugh, or more accurately, throw the bowl of dip at his head. I looked from his face to Lisa's, which was a mask of smug satisfaction. Her lips curled into a barely perceptible smirk. They were casting me aside, not for my health, but for their convenience, for their own selfish, lavish vacation. My act of selflessness, my hard work for the community fundraiser, was met with this cold, calculated betrayal. The irony, I tell you, was not lost on me. It was in that moment, as I stared at the two of them, that I felt a sudden jolt. A sharp, stabbing pain shot through my chest, so intense it took my breath away. Everything went dark for a moment. the cheerful chatter of the family dinner fading into a distant hum. The pain was more than physical. It was the manifestation of a lifetime of love and sacrifice being thrown back in my face. I remember waking up to the sterile smell of a hospital room, the beeping of the machines a harsh, unforgiving rhythm. I looked around, expecting to see Mark or Lisa, or at least a grandchild's worried face, but the room was empty. I was alone. A nurse came in, her face a mixture of pity and professional annoyance. "Your family left. They said they had a flight to catch." My own family, the people I had dedicated my life to, had chosen a vacation over my well-being, abandoning me in the ICU. I was stunned. A deep, bone-aching betrayal settling in my gut. The reality of what they had done hit me like a ton of bricks, and for a moment, all I felt was a crushing, overwhelming despair. I'm telling you this story because sometimes the ones you trust the most are the ones who betrayed you in the most spectacular way. You've just started this journey with me, but I promise you, what happens next will make you question everything you thought you knew about family. Don't go anywhere. You really don't want to miss the real show, because this is just the beginning of a story that will take a turn you never saw coming. The first few days in the ICU were a blur of pain, confusion, and a quiet, simmering rage that was hotter than any fever. My heart, the doctor said, had gone through some stress. Broken heart syndrome, the young doctor with kind eyes said, trying to be gentle. "It's a real thing, Mrs. Evans." But he wasn't talking about Frank's death from years ago, though. He was talking about the family dinner, the lie, and the vacation. I wasn't just sick. I was broken. I was a burden, a loose end they had neatly tied up with a bow of concern before jetting off to paradise. Lying there in that hospital bed, my only company, the IV drip, and the constant beeping of the monitoring machine, I had plenty of time to think. My mind, sharp as a tack despite the circumstances, went to the one thing they all wanted, the one thing that had been the unspoken prize in a silent, cruel game for years: the house. Frank and I had built that house from the ground up, with our own 2 hands and every penny we could spare. Every nail, every plank, every rosebush in the garden held a memory. It was more than just a house. It was a museum of our love, a testament to our life's work, and the pot of gold at the end of their rainbow. Lisa had been dropping hints for years. "It's too much for you, Helen," she'd say, her eyes darting around the living room as if calculating the resale value. "You should downsize." It was never a suggestion. It was an order disguised in a pretty package, a constant, nagging pressure that had been slowly wearing me down. The more I thought about their greed, about how they had so easily cast me aside to pursue their own selfish pleasures, the more a small, mischievous seed was planted in my mind. It was a delicious, almost sinful thought, so I let it grow, nurturing it with my pain and their betrayal. I needed to act fast before they got back and tried to help me, to force me into a nursing home and claim what they saw as their rightful inheritance. That's when the real planning began. I needed a co-conspirator, a man I could trust implicitly. That man was old Mr. Henderson, my lawyer, and a dear friend of Frank's. I used the burner phone I kept in my purse for emergencies, a little old-school habit Frank had insisted on, reminding me that you never know when you might need to make a call that no one else can trace. He sounded surprised to hear from me. "Helen, you're calling from the hospital?" he asked, his voice a gravelly rumble. "Just need to discuss a few things about the house, Fred. I've decided to sell." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Sell? Helen, are you sure?" he asked, sounding genuinely shocked, a flicker of concern in his voice. "As sure as I am that my son is on a beach right now without me," I replied, a small, bitter smile playing on my lips. The silence on the phone was all I needed to hear. He understood. He knew my son, he knew Lisa, and he knew the deep, unyielding love Frank and I had for that house. He knew that for me to even consider selling it, something truly terrible must have happened. The next week was a whirlwind of paperwork, phone calls, and clandestine meetings with real estate agents. I told the doctors I was feeling better, just needed a change of scenery. They, bless their hearts, were happy to see me up and about, mistaking my newfound energy for a recovery, not a plan for retribution. Mr. Henderson, a man of few words but a lot of action, got everything done with lightning speed. We put the house on the market, and just as I expected, it was snapped up almost immediately. After all, it was a beautiful home, filled with the warmth of a life well lived, a rarity in a market full of sterile, modern boxes. The closing happened right there in the hospital, with me in a wheelchair signing the final papers. The money, a truly staggering sum that would have set Mark and Lisa up for life, was wired directly into a new, private bank account. No one knew about it, not a soul. It was my one final act of control in a life they had tried to strip me of. As I was signing the final document, a nurse came in, her face bright with a well-meaning but misguided smile. "Good news, Mrs. Evans. Your son called. He just wanted to know if you were doing okay." I looked at her, then at the check I had just endorsed. "Did he ask to speak to me?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. She hesitated, a flicker of understanding in her eyes as she saw the pain behind my forced smile. "Well, he didn't ask to speak to you. He just asked me to pass along his love." I just smiled, a thin, tight-lipped expression that held 1,000 unspoken words. His love, I thought, was a lot cheaper than the house he was expecting. I could only imagine his face when he returned to an empty home with no inheritance waiting for him. They thought they could get away with emotional and moral betrayal, but they were about to learn that their greed had a very high price. This is where the story really takes a turn so sharp you'll get whiplash. My family thought I was a helpless, frail old woman in a hospital bed, a dead weight, as Lisa had so charmingly put it at a holiday dinner once. But they were about to learn that old women have a lot of fight left in them. You won't want to miss what happened when they finally came back home, because the final blow is something no one, not even then, could have ever predicted. The real suspense is about to begin, and I promise you, you won't want to be anywhere else when the truth comes out. The moment the funds from the house sale cleared, I left the hospital. There was no fanfare, no goodbyes, and certainly no maudlin sentimentality. It was just me, a small carry-on bag with my essentials, and a brand new debit card. The sense of freedom was a powerful, heady rush, a feeling I hadn't experienced since I was a teenager, taking my father's old Buick out for a joyride with a full tank of gas and no destination in mind. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, I felt like I was living for myself. Not for my son, not for my daughter-in-law, not for the memory of my husband, but just for me. The air outside felt different, crisper, as if I had finally taken my first real unburdened breath in a very long time. It was a tangible, visceral feeling of reclaiming myself, of putting my own oxygen mask on before trying to save anyone else, a lesson I learned far too late in life. My first official act as a free woman was to visit a small, dusty travel agency I'd seen on the corner of Main Street for years, but had never had the courage to enter. The agent, a woman named Gloria with a kind, wrinkled face and a name tag that was almost as old as she was, looked at me with curiosity. I must have been a sight to behold. A woman in her 60s with a determined look in her eye, a small suitcase, and an air of mischief I hadn't carried in years. "Where to, honey?" she asked, a warm smile on her face. "Somewhere sunny," I said, a mischievous glint in my eye, the kind Frank used to tease me about. "Somewhere with a beach and no phone signal, if you can manage it." She just laughed, a deep, knowing sound, and I told her my destination, Honolulu, Hawaii. I'd always wanted to see the volcanoes, to feel the raw power of the earth beneath my feet. It was a trip Frank and I had never gotten to take, a shared dream we'd kept in that jar on the mantel. Now, I was taking it for both of us, a final tribute to our life together and a defiant act of self-preservation. It felt like I was closing one chapter of my life, a long, sad one, and starting another, bright and full of possibility. Before I boarded the plane, I made one crucial call, the only one I would make from my new phone. I called my friend, Carol. She was the only person I trusted enough to tell the whole ugly truth. I asked her to take care of my dog, Max, a goofy golden retriever with a heart of gold who was, I believed, the only living being in my life who loved me unconditionally. I told her the entire story, leaving nothing out, from the phony dinner to the cold hospital bed. When I was done, there was a long, stunned pause on the other end of the line. "Helen, I don't know whether to hug you or buy you a martini," she finally said, her voice full of a mixture of shock, admiration, and a touch of genuine terror. "Do both when I get back," I said, a genuine, unburdened laugh bubbling up from my chest. I knew what I was doing was drastic, maybe even a little crazy, but it felt right. It was my way of reclaiming my life, of not letting them win, of refusing to be the victim in their story. I was rewriting the narrative, one flight at a time, one phone call at a time. I was no longer the sad widow. I was Helen, a woman with a plan. And just like that, I vanished. I left no forwarding address, no phone number. I didn't say goodbye to anyone except for a silent prayer to Frank, wherever he was, hoping he was proud of me for finally standing up for myself. It was a clean break, a new beginning. I imagined their faces when they came home, tanned and relaxed, only to find the house empty, the garage door ajar, and the front door unlocked. The thought of their frantic panic, the realization that I wasn't just a sick, frail old woman, but a ghost in their lives, was the sweetest revenge imaginable. I knew they would try to call, try to text, but I had a new phone, and my old one was in a trash can at the airport, along with the memory of their betrayal. I felt a sense of calm wash over me, a peace I hadn't felt in years. The house, the home, the life I had built was gone, but in its place was something far more valuable, my freedom. I'm on the plane now, watching the clouds drift by, a glass of champagne in my hand, a silent toast to my newfound freedom. It's a strange feeling, being completely untethered, a 65-year-old woman with a one-way ticket to paradise and no one to answer to. No one knows where I am. No one can find me. The past is just a memory now, a distant echo of a life I no longer live. And the future is an open book, a blank slate waiting to be filled with my own adventures on my own terms. I have my health, my money, and my sanity, all of which they tried to take from me. And they, my beautiful, greedy family, have nothing. Nothing at all. You've made it this far, but you're still on the runway. The real flight, the part where they land and find out the truth, is what you're waiting for. The anticipation is killing you, isn't it? Don't even think about leaving now, because the landing, I promise you, is going to be the most exhilarating, jaw-dropping part of the whole journey. This is where their perfect little world comes crashing down, and you get a front row seat. The first few days in Hawaii were a surreal, sun-drenched blur. I walked barefoot on the warm sand, the salty breeze a welcome change from the sterile air of the hospital and the suffocating atmosphere of my old life. I went to a luau where I laughed so hard my cheeks hurt, and I took a helicopter tour over a volcano, feeling a thrilling sense of adventure I hadn't felt in decades. It was not just a vacation. It was a pilgrimage to myself, a rediscovery of the woman I used to be before life and family responsibilities had worn me down into a ghost of myself. I spent my days exploring, not thinking about my past, just living in the glorious, sun-drenched present. I was not a victim. I was a victor. And then, just as I was sipping a tropical drink on my lanaya, the phone rang. It was a frantic, unhinged call from Carol, my voice of reason friend. "Helen, they're back! Mark and Lisa! They're calling me nonstop, asking where you are!" She practically screamed, her voice a mixture of glee and exasperation. I could hear the pure, unadulterated chaos in the background, a cacophony of frantic, angry voices. "What did you tell them?" I asked, my voice calm, a serene smile on my face. "I just told them you were resting comfortably," she said, a snort of laughter escaping her. "And when Mark insisted on talking to you, I told him you were on a trip, a much-needed vacation." I could practically hear Mark's blood pressure rising from across the ocean. The irony was so thick you could cut it with a knife. I decided it was time to make contact, but on my terms. I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of a face-to-face confrontation, not yet. I sent a single, short text message to Mark from my new untraceable number. "Having a lovely time. The beaches here are beautiful. Hope you enjoyed your vacation." The reply was instantaneous, a barrage of angry, incoherent messages filled with question marks and exclamation points. "Where are you? The house is empty. What did you do?" I just smiled, a deep, contented smile that reached my eyes. The thought of their frantic return to an empty house, a house they thought was their inheritance, was the sweetest revenge imaginable. I knew their next move. They would try to freeze my accounts, to report me missing. But I had a secret weapon, my lawyer, Fred Henderson. He had been a friend of Frank's, and he owed me a favor or two. I had given him strict instructions. If anyone, especially Mark and Lisa, tried to access my accounts, he was to stonewall them, citing client confidentiality. I also had a second, even better secret. The money from the house sale? It wasn't just sitting in an account waiting to be discovered. I had used a significant portion of it to buy a small beachfront villa in Hawaii, a place of my own, free and clear. It was a simple, beautiful little place with a garden full of tropical flowers and a view of the ocean that took my breath away every single morning. It was a physical manifestation of my new life, a place where I was the only person in charge. Mark and Lisa, meanwhile, were losing their minds. I got a call from my old neighbor, Mrs. Gable, who said they were raising a ruckus. She said Mark was in a panic, calling the police, trying to break into the house. The cops, bless them, told him it was a civil matter. They had no right to the house, it was legally mine, and now it belonged to someone else. The look on his face, Mrs. Gable said, was a sight to behold. He was a man who, in a single day, had gone from expecting a fortune to inheriting nothing but a legal headache. I'm writing this from my new lanaya, the gentle rhythm of the waves' soothing backdrop. I'm not a victim. I'm not a burden. I am a woman who was pushed too far and who in the end refused to break. My revenge wasn't in yelling or screaming or a dramatic confrontation. It was quiet. It was deliberate, and it was perfectly sweet. The culmination of this story is about to unfold, the final piece of my little game. The moment they realized just how badly they messed up and the price they truly paid for their greed. You've come so far, don't turn back now. The final act, I promise you, will be the most satisfying. My final act was a simple one, yet it was devastatingly effective. I decided to send a single, final message to Mark and Lisa. I wanted them to know, with no room for doubt, that I was not a victim and that their greed had a very high price. I typed a brief email, but before I sent it, I attached a picture of me on my new lanai. In the photo, I was smiling, a genuine, unburdened smile that reached my eyes. I was holding a fruity drink, its bright colors a stark contrast to the sterile white walls of the hospital room where they had left me. Behind me, the pristine Hawaiian ocean shimmered, a perfect crystal-clear blue that was more beautiful than any picture in their travel brochure. The subject line of the email was, "A little update. The body of the email was simple and to the point, but it was laced with a quiet, cutting sarcasm that I knew would drive them absolutely mad. Just wanted to let you know I'm doing much better now that I've had some rest. The money from the sale of the house has been put to good use. I've bought myself a lovely little villa here in Hawaii, a place where the sun always shines and the company is always good. And no, it's not too much for me, Lisa. It's perfect. I've attached the closing documents in case you were curious. Oh, and by the way, I also gave a very generous donation to the community center in your names, the same one I was volunteering for while you were planning your trip. I believe they've even put up a small plaque. It reads, "In loving memory of Helen Evans, donated by her very thoughtful son and daughter-in-law." I'll have to see about getting a picture of it for you. All my best, Helen. The response was a chaotic, unhinged mess of phone calls and emails from both of them, but I didn't answer a single one. I knew they were in a panic. They had not only lost their inheritance, but they were now saddled with a public, albeit passive-aggressive, monument to their own selfishness. The plaque was a subtle, yet brutal jab. They couldn't tear it down without a public scandal, and they couldn't leave it up without it being a constant, humiliating reminder of their actions. I also received a call from my lawyer, Fred. "Helen," he said, his voice full of a genuine, hearty laugh. "They tried to get a court order to freeze your assets, told them to get lost, said it was a civil matter. They're in a real pickle now, aren't they?" "A delicious pickle," I said, a slow, contented smile spreading across my face. I'm here now, on my lanai, watching the sunset paint the sky in a riot of colors. My husband, Frank, always loved the sunset. I feel his presence here, a sense of peace I haven't felt since he passed. My family, the one I had, is gone, but I have a new one now. The friends I've made here, the warmth of the community, the simple joy of waking up to the sound of the ocean, this is my family. And I, a 60-something woman who was once a burden, am now a homeowner in paradise, living my best life. And the best part? The one who bought my old house is a lovely, young couple who plan to have a family of their own there. I even left them a note, telling them to fill it with love, laughter, and an open door for everyone. Something my son had forgotten how to do. This story isn't just about revenge. It's about taking your life back. It's about finding strength in the quietest of moments. And if you've enjoyed reading this, I'd appreciate it if you'd share it with others. After all, a good story, like a good lesson, is meant to be shared. Maybe, just maybe, it'll help someone else find the courage to do what's right for them too. I hope this story gives you a moment of quiet reflection and perhaps a small bit of inspiration. Until next time. The day after I sent that final email, I received another phone call from Carol. Her voice was full of laughter, a rich, genuine sound that was contagious even from thousands of miles away. "Helen, you are not going to believe this," she said, practically breathless with amusement. "Lisa tried to sue the community center. She tried to get a court order to force them to take down the plaque." I leaned back in my lounge chair, a smile spreading across my face, the warm Hawaiian sun on my skin a welcome contrast to the cold, calculating cruelty of my old life. "And what did they say, my dear Carol?" I asked, savoring every moment of this glorious retribution. "They laughed at her, Helen. They laughed. And then they told her that since the donation was so generous, a truly life-changing sum, they said, they had decided to rename the entire community hall in your honor. It's now officially the Helen Evans Community Hall. And the plaque, it's bigger now. It reads, 'The Helen Evans Community Hall, generously donated by her very thoughtful son and daughter-in-law.'" I laughed until tears streamed down my face, tears of pure, unadulterated joy. It wasn't just revenge, it was justice. Their greed and their public, humiliating betrayal had become a permanent, public spectacle. They had paid for a monument to their own selfishness, and it was a masterpiece. Every time they drove past that hall, every time they heard a child playing inside it, they would be reminded of what they lost. I sit on my lanai now, watching the sun dip below the horizon, painting the sky in a riot of colors I once thought I would never see again. The house I built, the life I knew, it's all a memory now. A photograph in a forgotten album. But in my heart, something much more valuable has taken its place. A profound sense of peace. I don't regret a single thing. This was the price of my freedom, and I paid it with a smile. I am not an object of pity. I am not a victim of circumstance. I am a woman who was pushed to her limit and found the strength to rebuild her life from the ashes. A woman who proved that true wealth is not measured in property or inheritance, but in the quiet, undeniable power of self-worth.